My name's Lucy Barnes, and I'm an editor and outreach coordinator at Open Book Publishers, which is a scholar-led press based in the UK. And I also help to coordinate the Open Access Books Network, where I work with colleagues from Spark Europe and from OAPEN. And today I'm going to try and give you a brief overview of open access book publishing in the UK, focusing particularly on how it's funded. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about Open Book Publishers and what we do at our press. So OA book policies in the UK. There's a mandate from one national funder in the UK, UKRI, that was announced, I think, last year after a period of consultation. And for books, it will take effect in 2024. But that will just be for books whose contracts are signed in 2024. So I think it will take a while before we see actual open access books as a result of that policy. There is funding that has been put aside to help fund it, but the criteria for how that funding will be distributed is unclear at the moment. There's also a possible REF policy. So the REF, you may or may not know, is it's called the Research Excellence Framework, and it's basically how the government decides how it's going to distribute funding to particular universities. And there is a possibility that for the next REF, the research that will qualify for assessment has to be published open access, but that's definitely not a guarantee at this stage. If that happens, it will be quite a big move for the UK. But as I say, we don't know if it's going to happen or not yet. And then there are also individual funders. For example, the Wellcome Trust is quite a large funder, which has an open access policy, which it funds, and some pots of money from academic societies and organisations like that. But it's quite patchy. It's not very organised at the moment. It's still quite piecemeal. And of course, as you'll know, there's European policy to an extent. So Coalition S have released a statement which is supportive of open access books, but doesn't contain any kind of hard policy or mandate at the moment. It's a kind of indication of a direction of travel rather than a fixed policy. There's also a project starting next year called Palomira, which is intended to find out why, compared to journals, there are so few policies for open access books, and to try and make recommendations and suggestions for there to be more. So we'll see the outcome of that. But at the moment, the picture is very mixed. So how do presses in the UK fund open access books? So there is a mix of different ways. The book processing charge, BPC, is an obvious way, which a lot of presses do use. Obviously, that's where a single author or their funder is charged for the publication of a book. It has the merit of being fairly simple for the press, but it is unpopular by and large with authors, and necessarily excludes anyone that can't pay, obviously. There's grant funding as well. So the press that I work for, Open Book Publishers, we ask authors, if they can, to apply for grant funding to help defray the costs of publishing with us. But if they can't source grant funding, we will still publish their book. But there are lots of small pots of money where an author might go. So it might be a subject body, it might be an academic society, it might be a department, a university, a funder. So there's lots of different sources of money, but again, they're not coordinated. Some presses have university subsidy, and Lara is going to be talking about that from the perspective of UCL. Some presses use collective library funding models, and Open Book Publishers, we have one, which I'll talk a little bit about. And Emily is going to be talking about Central European University Press, who have a slightly different collective library funding model. And then, of course, there is sales as well, because you could still sell paperbacks, hardbacks, and at OBP, we also sell some of our digital editions, which I'll talk about. And I've included on these slides a couple of links. I don't know if the slides will be shared afterwards, but this is a report from a project that I'm involved with called COPIM, looking at different revenue models for open access books, and also a collection of case studies of individual presses who've shared how they fund what they do. So I've tried to kind of slightly group presses in kind of loose groupings for the purposes of these next two slides. because different presses tend to take slightly different approaches to funding open access books. So we have born open access presses, which just simply, it's, you probably have a similar expression, but the idea being that you've always published open access books. The press was founded to publish open access books, and you only publish open access books in general. So there's two kind of groups of born OA presses. There's scholar-led presses, so presses that were founded by an academic or group of academics, and then university presses. And these generally favour collective ways of working. So that might mean simply sharing information, sharing resources, helping each other out with answering questions or solving problems, or it might mean something a bit more developed than that. So it might mean taking part in a collective library funding programme together. It might mean building infrastructure together, for example. So scholar-led are a group of scholar-led presses who are doing that with a project called the Coping Project, which I don't think I'll have time to talk about, but which Emily will mention in her presentation. Some of these presses use book processing charges, although I think it's fair to say that many of them are trying to explore ways they could move away from book processing charges. And also, obviously, the university presses often have access to institutional funding as well. And then there are two more groups who are maybe slightly different from each other. So university presses, which are either transitioning to open access, either in whole or in part, or are experimenting at least with some different ways of funding open access books. So in the UK, Liverpool University Press uses the same model as Central European University Press, which Emily will talk about, which is a collective library funding model, which is trying to flip part of their output to open access. And Cambridge University Press have a small pilot project called Flip It Open, which is trying to use a threshold of sales. So once a book has sold X amount of copies, it will become eligible potentially to be flipped to open access. So this group, some of them are experimenting with collective funding models or experimental approaches. And then you have commercial and larger university presses, which in the main seem currently to be fairly happy to stick with book processing charges, maybe with some transformative agreements as well. It remains to be seen if they're going to move away from that or develop other models, but at the moment it's the book processing charge that they seem to be sticking with. So just to talk briefly before I finish about open book publishers and what we do. So we're a scholar-led born open access press, founded by a group of academics, so you can see on the slide there. And we were founded in 2008, so relatively early as far as open access books go. We're based in Cambridge in the United Kingdom, and we're a not-for-profit press, which obviously has implications for our business model because it means that we only have to break even. We don't have to make a profit, but if we do make a profit, that money is reinvested into the press. And the press was always founded with a single mission, which is to make high-quality, long-form research freely available everywhere. So everything that we do is kind of built around this objective, basically. And this was the mission of the press because the academics were used to publishing in a closed access system, found it incredibly frustrating as authors, and found it very difficult as readers as well. The closed access model just is failing. It doesn't get to enough people. It's too expensive. Whereas open access books are just read so much more widely. They can be used and reused in so many more different contexts. And so that's been the mission of the press from when it was founded. So we publish all of our books open access from the day they're published. We publish 40 books a year at the moment, and we've published over 260 books in total. They're all carefully peer reviewed, so it's obviously important to us that our books are of high quality. And then they are accessed worldwide over 20,000 times each month. So this is how we fund that. And it sort of breaks down essentially into three big chunks of revenue. So that the largest, the yellow chunk there, is sales. So we charge for paperback, hardback, EPUB, and Mobi editions, and then we release freely PDFs, HTML, and XML editions. And despite the fact that all of our books are open access from the day that they're published, we still make most of the largest chunk of our money from sales. And then the blue chunk there, grants and donations. So I mentioned earlier that we ask authors, if they can, to apply for pots of money to help fund the publication of their book. And if they can't do that, we still publish their book if it passes peer review. But if they can do that, then it helps us, obviously, to fund our work. And then the last chunk there, the green chunk, is our library membership programme, our collective library funding programme. So I'm just going to talk briefly about that. So we have over 240 libraries involved in our library membership programme, and they pay us an annual fee, which is tiered by the size of the institution. And in return for that, they get some benefits. So they get discounts on paper copies, and they get all of our ebook editions for free, not just the ones that we usually release freely, but all of them. And they get a few other benefits, which I can talk about if you want in the questions. But the main incentive, the main reason that people join this programme is because they want to support our work. We present ourselves very much as what we are, which is a mission-driven press. And so libraries want to buy into that and support our work. And we would like to see this become, this green chunk, the library membership programme, become the second largest chunk in that pie chart. So rather than having grant income be larger than the library membership programme, we would like it to be the other way around. Because for us, collective funding is fairer as a way of funding open access books, because everybody pays a small amount rather than anyone having to pay a lot. And then it's also lower risk for us as a press, because we have over 240 libraries, and obviously we don't want to lose any of them, but in any given year we might lose 2 or 3, and that's fine. That doesn't matter. We can weather that. We get more library members in as well. So it's more sustainable and lower risk for us as well. And I just wanted to finish by mentioning the Open Access Books Network, which I mentioned at the beginning. And it's a network that I helped coordinate with colleagues from Spark Europe and from OAPEN. And it's free. You can just sign up and join it. And we share information, resources, new developments. We have events, we share reports, we have a discussion board where people can ask questions. And it's all basically for anyone who's interested in open access book publishing, whether that's an author, a publisher, a reader, a librarian, an infrastructure provider. And it's part of that sort of collective way of working that I was talking about, collaborative, collective, mutual support. So if you're interested in that and would like to check it out, we would be delighted. And like I say, there's discussion boards there. You can ask questions. You can come to our events. So please do check it out. And with that, thank you very much for listening. And I look forward to any questions that you might have.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this session. And thank you for the introduction, Lucy. So I'm Lara Speicher. I'm head of publishing at UCL Press, which is University College London. And we launched in 2015 as the UK's first fully open access university press. And I'm going to talk a bit about why we were set up, what we've achieved, and how we're funded. So we were set up largely to offer an open access publishing opportunity for UCL academics, but also we are open to authors from other institutions, which I'll explain a bit more about later. And as Lucy said, publishing research monographs in a traditional closed route is very problematic. And monographs typically sell only around 200 copies around the world in their lifetime. So this does not deliver effective dissemination. And UCL is committed to being a force for good and enlightenment in the world, as you can see in this quote, which means ensuring that the products of UCL's research are made as widely available as possible for the benefit of everybody. So the benefits of having an open access university press at the institution is to support the academics who work for us, so that their research can be read around the world. And I will show you some of the download figures later. The university supports the entire research life cycle, and research is available to regions in which research is otherwise unavailable or unaffordable, and is more available widely to policymakers, the public, and citizen scientists. So a little bit about what we publish. We publish scholarly monographs, textbooks and journals and other formats, as you can see here. Everything we publish is open access immediately on publication in PDF form, so that's available for free. We also sell print and ebooks, and similarly our journals are completely free. Since we launched in 2015, we have published around 250 books, and we have a portfolio of 15 journals, mainly in the humanities and social sciences. We're now publishing 50 books a year, and we are looking at further expansion due to demand from authors. And here are examples of some of the academic journals that we also publish. So I've mentioned that UCL authors are supported by the institution to publish with University Press, with UCL Press. So there's no charge to UCL Press authors. We do make a charge to non-UCL authors, a book processing charge, as Lucy described. And this covers the peer review, the editing, the typesetting, proofreading and indexing. And currently that is set to cover direct costs of around £5,000. We do have some waiver schemes. So non-UCL authors who publish in a series led by a UCL editor are not charged. And we have a waiver scheme for up to 5 non-UCL books per year for authors who are unable to secure a book processing charge. We have seen an increase in recent years in authors who are getting book processing charges in order to publish with us. And those are found from various pots of money, as Lucy described. It's a very patchy landscape with money available from either individual departments, institutions, funders, specialist societies, etc. Overall, our author profile for single author monographs and for general editors, it's about 75% UCL, 25% non-UCL. But if you take into consideration the books in series and the authors and contributors to edited volumes, it's probably about 50% UCL, 50% non-UCL. We undertake quite extensive dissemination and marketing of both the open access and the print titles to ensure that they are available in the widest range of places possible, and that they are promoted through a wide range of marketing activity to ensure that people know about them and know where to find them. So that's through social media, book reviews, conferences, launches, and other forms of promotion. We also support authors to promote their own work through their networks. So I'd like to show you what this activity has achieved, because this explains really the major reason why UCL Press decided to set up an open access press. So we measure downloads from all the platforms that we work with. We receive reports from them, and we measure that. And this is shown both in terms of the number of downloads and where in the world those downloads come from. If you'd like to see this in more detail, on our website, there is a dashboard where you can view the statistics for each book. You can see how many times each book has been downloaded and where in the world. So since we launched, this is the total number of downloads that we've had. So over 6 million downloads in the last 7 years or so. And 247 countries and territories reached around the world. And you can see here the major areas. Top 10 by countries, we have United States, UK at the top, as you'd expect. But if you look further down the list, we're really reaching parts of the world where it would be quite hard to get print books to, and where they might be unaffordable in a traditional format. Just to show you the most downloaded titles. So as you can see, many of these have reached well over 100,000, and the most downloaded has been downloaded 661,000 times since publication. So that's a huge measure of impact and reach that book has achieved, and these others. And when we consider that in the context of a typical monograph possibly selling 200 copies, you can see the real world impact of this model. But even specialist titles also reach a considerable audience. So you can see the downloads here of some quite niche specialist books, still reaching 10, 15, 20,000, which is still considerably more than they would otherwise. Downloads by platform varies considerably, as you can see, and this is why we try to ensure that our books are available on a very wide range. We also sell print copies, another aspect that Lucy also mentioned, and we provide that as a service. We don't make a profit on these. The retail price is set really just to cover the sales costs and to recoup the printing costs. And this is just available as print on demand for those individual customers and libraries who still value a print copy. And you can see here that even though the books are made available open access, they still sell in reasonable numbers, and these numbers for some of the most popular books are comparable to the typical sales that we would see. Otherwise, specialist titles still sell maybe 100, maybe fewer. But the question of whether making a book available open access, whether that affects print sales or not, I think there's evidence to show that it doesn't, but perhaps the evidence needs to be gathered more widely in order to reach firm conclusions. But there have been studies that show that it doesn't have necessarily either a negative or a positive impact. But as I say, the jury is still out on that one. A quick look into some author feedback on Twitter from many of our authors who feel that this model has really benefited their work, that they've seen it have such wide reach, and this has led to so many opportunities for them in terms of how it's affected their work and their ability to seek funds, attract students, influence policy. These are things that are starting to emerge and to be shown to have this effect. So I will just finish by showing you our staffing levels and how we're funded. So as Lucy described, we are mainly funded by the institution. And the institution wants to fund us because of the impact that we deliver through the downloads, as we've just seen. To deliver this number of books, so going up to 60 books a year and 15 journals, we have 10 members of staff at the moment covering functions in commissioning, production, sales, marketing, and publicity, journals, and textbooks. And our funding in the pie chart here, you can see in blue that the majority of our funds come from UCL subsidy. Sales income is the next one, and then some funding from book processing charges and consultancy and services. Although looking ahead to future years, we can see the book processing charge income starting to increase, as I mentioned before. And in context, as a percentage of UCL's annual income and as a percentage of its annual research income, this is minimal. Therefore, in the wider context of the things that UCL funds and the income that it has, this is a very small slice. However, the impact it delivers is very significant. So I'm very happy to answer questions at the end, and thank you all for listening.
Okay. Dzień dobry wszystkim. Ja zacznę po polsku i wtedy drugą część po angielsku powiem. Nazywam się Emilia Poznańska i jestem dyrektorką wydawnictwa Central European University Press. Zanim dołączyłam do wydawnictwa, byłam dyrektorką strategii w De Gruyter i wcześniej pracowałam dla Wersity w Warszawie i to było w modelu całkowicie otwartego dostępu. Jestem Polką i ponad 10 lat zajmuję się budową modeli i zbiorów Open Access. Bardzo się cieszę, że mogę tutaj być dzisiaj. To jest pierwszy webinar, który prowadzę po polsku. To proszę mi wybaczyć błędy i tak jak mówiłam, drugą część powiem po angielsku. Na slajdach jest mój e-mail i też często jestem w Warszawie. To jakby były jakieś pytania albo jeżeli spotkanie by było przydatne, to jak najbardziej jestem dostępna. Dobrze, to czym zajmiemy się podczas dzisiejszej prezentacji? Bym chciała zacząć od dlaczego OA i dlaczego to jest ważne i w skrócie, w jaki sposób książki są finansowane i nowe modele, jakie są nowe modele na rynku. I większą część będzie o Opening the Future. To w skrócie, dlaczego Open Access i dlaczego to ma znaczenie? Pandemia COVID-19 ukazała, jak istotna otwarty dostęp jest dla przyszłości komunikacji akademickiej. Tradycyjny model wydawnicy nie działa. Sprzedaż wydawnictw akademickich spadła, jednak wciąż pracujemy jak dawniej. Open Access, otwarty dostęp, pozwala na wzrost czytelnictwa, użytku i cytowań. Mandaty fundatorów, Funder Mandates, na przykład od ERC albo UKRI rosną i ponadto musimy poświęcać więcej uwagi książkom. Czasopisma już są daleko w trakcie przeniesień na otwarty dostęp, a co stanie się, jeżeli STM przeniesie się na otwarty dostęp, a książki w HSS pozostaną zamknięte. Policies, mandates i praktyki. Rośnie liczba policies i mandates, ale te policies i mandates nie zawsze są związane z finansowaniem. I kto płaci za monografię Open Access? Fundatorzy badań, instytucje i biblioteki. Model Opening the Future, o którym dziś będę mówić, polega na finansowaniu z bibliotek, ale jako wydawnictwo pracujemy z różnymi źródłami funduszy. Na przykład, kiedy autor zgłasza się do nas z grantem z ERC, wykorzystamy to, by wydać w otwartym dostępie. Podobnie jest, jeżeli twórca ma dostęp do środków z instytucji i możemy wykorzystać je do wydawania w OA. Korzystamy z modelu Opening the Future tylko w przypadku książek, które nie mają innych źródeł finansowania. I to jest ważne dla bibliotekarzy. I teraz myślę, że przejdę, żeby mówić po angielsku, bo jednak jest mi trochę łatwiej. So what would change in an open access world? First and foremost, equitable access. Closed content would be eliminated if not significantly reduced. And an important part of moving into open access is about bringing the costs down throughout the value chain. We also expect that acquisitions budgets will increasingly move into open access. So in short, what are the models for open access, for monographs out there? And I won't speak very long about this because it's already been covered today. And there are different ways to slice the market. But what we are seeing is a really interesting time of experimentation. And what we do need from librarians is support for these tests, because if we don't test them out, then none of them will stick and none of this will work for books. So briefly, there are very large companies working with journal-like models. So the Springer Nature Berkeley Agreement is quite a good example of that. And this works for big companies and wealthy institutions. But the HSS monograph landscape is much more diverse than the journals publishing one. And this means that we need to look at other models for other sized presses. So we have large university press models that we already talked about. We have small to medium-sized university presses like CEU Press and Liverpool University Press that have a backlist and are testing out opening the future. And we have scholar-led born OA presses that we have heard about today already, and the great impact that they have. Just 1 minute on the background. The Opening the Future project is part of a larger COPIM grant and project that was funded by Research England and Arcadia. There are several work packages, and it's worth taking a look online at the work being done there. The part that we're involved in is about business models. So what the aim was to create a business model to transition existing presses into open access. And 2 words about Central European University Press. We're nearly 300 years old. We have a fantastic backlist of 500 titles, and we are moving quite quickly into open access for the reasons that we've talked about already. In the spring of 2020, the majority of our titles became freely available on the Project Muse platform, as other publishers did. And you won't be surprised to hear that our usage figures soared. And interestingly, 7 of the 10 most downloaded titles were over 10 years old, which again shows the differences between journal articles and books. So now to talk about opening the future. And this slide goes over some of the conditions for the model and what we set out to achieve. So this is a model that works for presses that have a substantial backlist. And that is important because in the market, we see 2 groups of librarians. Ones that have open access budgets, often called scholarly communications budgets, and other libraries, a much bigger group of libraries, that only have a conventional purchasing budget, used, for example, for journal subscriptions or buying books. And what we wanted to do is to come up with a model that could use both those budgets and to not limit the pool of librarians that can participate. So the way the model works is that libraries buy packages of backlist content, and these titles are not open access. These are packages of 50 titles that librarians choose for their own collection. And all the revenue that we make from that is used to publish future titles at the press in open access. One common objection that we hear is what happens when the backlist runs out at the press. Well, we did the maths, and it will take decades for our backlist to run out. And we hope that by that time, we would have made that shift into open access, recognizing that open access is cheaper, more efficient, and more equitable, and also better suited to the goals of librarians. So rather than continue to collect solely for their own collections, we're building up a global collection that everyone can access. And lastly, what we wanted with the model is to not have an inbuilt threshold. So some of the models that we see out there, they have to reach a certain funding target before the collection of books is made open access. We didn't want to do that because there is an inherent risk associated with that. And it's very easy for a model like that to fail. So the way ours works is, as soon as we have enough money to publish our next book in open access, we do so. And this is a sort of safer approach, a more gradual approach of moving into open access. So opening the future in a nutshell, this is how it works. So librarians choose from a selection of packages. These are packages of 50 books. The titles are available to the subscribing library only, so these are not open access, and they're provided by Muse in our case. And if librarians don't want to subscribe to a package, they can just become a member, so they can participate in the model that way without receiving books as well. And then UCL Press uses these funds to make the next books open access. And these are obviously available to everyone in the world that has internet access. And so what's exciting about this model is that librarians are not only building up their own collections, but they're also growing the collection. And we're growing the number of books published in open access as we go along. Librarians are also not tied in indefinitely, so they subscribe for 3 years. After that, they have perpetual access to this package of books. And these are the packages that we curated, and these are around the specializations of the press. So history, political science, editor's choice and library selection. And a little bit about the benefits. So the pricing on this model has to be right, because this isn't a model that is just designed for UCL Press. It's a model that's designed for all small to medium-sized university presses that are interested. So we wanted a model that works for many presses and that would work for many libraries wanting to support these presses moving into open access. So we wanted to come up with fair pricing, and the prices on this slide are in dollars, which I can tell you the euro pricing. It's we have 3 bands, around 1,200 euros for the biggest institution, down to 350 euros for the smallest institution. And we think this is fairly affordable in comparison to other models on the market. And for a goal of 25 books published in open access each year and 50 titles in the collection, that works out to about $12 per book per library. So like other membership schemes, sort of collective action schemes, as the number of members grow, the costs can go down. So it gets better and better the more libraries participate. So if we hit the target of 200 libraries or so for 25 books, and that's the modeling that's on this slide, then libraries will pay about $12 per title per year. If we increase the number of libraries, then we can decide how we go ahead. Either we bring the costs down even further, or we'll turn to our members and ask them whether they want to publish more books in open access with that funding. And so as we accrue more funding, the more books we can publish in open access. And we just announced our 10th book to be funded through the program, and that's within about just over a year. So the support for the model is growing. We have endorsements from the Center for Research Libraries. We have the California Digital Library Network that have signed up, and the number of members are growing. Okay, so I should say that the first book we published under the program is a book by Tomasz Kamusala, and it's I actually have it in the office. I'll show you. It's a big print book. It's an atlas, but it's available in OA, and it's a gorgeous publication. Oh, this is it here. So it's a gigantic book in print, but it's also available in open access. So and that's it. And just to end, it is our sort of pledge to librarians is that this is great value for money. It's not only hitting that aims to move into open access, but it is aiming to bring the costs down. So our highest membership fee for 1 year's access to 50 titles is equal to about half a single journal APC. And last slide, it's just my contact. If there are any questions, I'd be very happy to talk about them. Also, the link to the toolkit, that's the last link on the slide, details exactly how we set the model up, and there's lots of really useful materials there, from the modeling and the pricing right through to the marketing of the model. So please do take a look and let us know if you have any questions.